Now, the shocking indifference with which the establishment has treated sufferers of COVID vaccine side effects has been laid bare with the revelation that zero compensation has been paid. Zero compensation for more than 1,200 claims to the Vaccine Damages Payment Scheme. We have started to hear the right noises, albeit quiet little whimpers at this stage, from the people in power who've previously wanted to ignore this issue completely. This clip of Jeremy Hunt, chair of the Health and Social Care Select Committee, has gone viral in recent days because of the former Health Secretary's acknowledgement of the extent of the vaccine damages problem.
Just wondered what your thoughts were with regarding to an investigation on the serious adverse reactions that we're currently seeing. Thank you.
Debbie's question, I want to take that away because I think it's something that my committee might be interested in looking at. And I'll need to talk to my other members of my committee because we decide these things democratically. But when I was Health Secretary, I commissioned the University of Sheffield, Leeds and Manchester to do a report onto medication error. And, we found there were 8,000 deaths a year. And, obviously, we are very concerned about the adverse reactions that we have from the COVID vaccines. It's not for me to make a judgment as to the balance of risk, but I think we do need to fully understand the issues that you raise.
However, former NHS nurse Debbie Evans, who bravely challenged Hunt in a patient care webinar, has since revealed concerns about his dedication to the issue. She was told by Hunt last week, more than a month after she sent a follow-up email, that she had not yet raised the prospect of a probe with the committee. Here's what she had to say.
He said on camera, and he said in that email, that these COVID-19 vaccine serious adverse reactions are of a serious concern. And yet they're not serious enough to put on the agenda for the Health and Social Care Committee or on his own Patient Watch Committee that he founded. The concerns are there. These numbers are escalating every single day, but he clearly doesn't want to answer the question, and that makes me even more suspicious.
Hunt reiterated that he appreciated concerns of adverse vaccine reactions and said he would bring up the subject at a future meeting. So clearly this fight is not over yet, and I suppose it's no surprise the government's passivity after the likes of our own Bev Turner were villainised and even labelled neo-Nazis for expressing concerns about vaccine side effects for the past 2 years. So take a look back at her comments on ITV's This Morning in May last year, which actually resulted in 52 Ofcom complaints being made against her. This clip has gone viral this week because, let's just say, the comments don't sound so outrageous now.
It's a trial drug. We are still in clinical trials, Matthew. And
why are you so?
You just have to look at the numbers.
Just in the sense of, like, the finest minds of science have, in an extraordinarily short amount of time, have come up with this vaccine. It's proven that it's working statistically. Why are you so cynical about it?
We have no long-term data.
Why are you so sceptical about the whole thing?
99.8% because of the facts. 99.8% survival rate from COVID-19. The average age of death is 82. Why do you want to put a 22-year-old with her whole life ahead of her as part of a clinical trial when we do not know the long-term implications?
Bev Turner, it's fascinating looking back at this clip now. Do you feel a sense of vindication?
Do I feel a sense of vindication? When that debate was actually happening, what you don't see there, that was particularly about the NHS mandates. It was the first time that that had been raised as a consideration, whether doctors should be mandated to take a trial drug. It was the first debate I'd had about that. And so I was very clearly trying to make the point, that everybody should be an individual risk-benefit profile as to whether they take the drug or not. And it was really obvious very early on, not because I was digging out obscure data, although I was spending a lot of time doing that, but because Patrick Vallance and Chris Whitty had said very clearly in those ridiculous press conferences, this will not stop you catching or passing on COVID-19. This is to mitigate your symptoms. But of course, mitigating symptoms, therefore being less transmissible, made a lie of the concept of asymptomatic transmission. So that's what that debate was about. Do I feel vindicated now? Well, yeah, obviously. I mean, I didn't change the conversation. Dr. Steve James changed that particular conversation when he took on Sajid Javid at King's Hospital. But I like to think in some way I was shouting into the abyss at that particular time because nobody was listening. Because mandates were predicated on the notion of this drug stopping transmission, take that away, clarified the science behind that, and it made a mockery of the fact that you have to take a drug because the state tells you have to, and that was it. And so that conversation was very frustrating to me because it just wasn't built on any sort of science.
Benjamin, as a journalist, why have you not been looking into the vaccine damage?
I mean, I'm not a health and science journalist, and I think they do much better jobs because they have a lot of context. And one of the things is, of course, clearly it's right to say that we don't have long-term data, but we also knew that it was highly effective and, a year and a half or whatever it is into the rollout of the COVID vaccine, there have been some people with side effects, but a very, very small amount. One of the questions that was raised was the problem of blood clots, but we now have the data that says you're 10 times more likely to get a blood clot from COVID than from a COVID vaccine. And so that's why you shouldn't focus on those...
But Carole, that doesn't mean that the people who have suffered these side effects shouldn't be compensated. I mean, I've got someone on the show tomorrow night on Uncancelled who has had to have his leg amputated because of a side effect from the AstraZeneca vaccine. Are you seriously telling me he shouldn't be compensated and that shouldn't be a big story?
I'm very sorry about that he's having his leg vaccinated, but
Amputated? It's been amputated.
But I'm very sorry that's happened to him. But, I want to take issue with what Bev said about it being a trial drug. It wasn't a trial drug.
It's still a trial drug.
No, it's not a trial drug. You realise that every vaccine that is produced is, in effect, a trial drug.
No. I can't believe we're still having this conversation.
Bev, you had a long say there, so let everyone else have a say. The smallpox vaccine, when it came out in the 50s, caused myocardia in young men. The polio vaccine, when it came out, people died because of the polio virus. In 2008, which isn't that long ago, babies developed febrile seizures because of the MMR vaccine after 7 to 10 days. We know that vaccines aren't a cure-all for everyone, but the bottom line is the COVID vaccine, and this is a guy, he's a guy called Paul Gofford, he's the director of vaccine research at the University of Alabama. He says he's never, ever seen a vaccine as effective as COVID. 90%.
My first question would be, who is funding that guy?
Finish, Bev.
Almost nobody.
Bev, this is what happens. People who disagree with people who like you, don't agree with the vaccine. No one is ever allowed to speak. So,
people were allowed to speak over me.
Well, I'm trying now. This guy said 90% decreased risk of infections, 94% effectiveness against hospitalisation. So whatever you say about this being a trial drug, it saved lives, and you can't get away from that fact. And if people have been damaged by this, I'm very sorry, I really am. And I don't say that glibly or lightly. But the thing is, this vaccine saved many millions of lives, and we know that for a fact.
We don't know that for a fact?
Yes, we do.
I'm so sorry, but we don't know that for a fact.
OK, well, let me tell you what happened to the people who didn't get the vaccine, the elderly in the care homes. In the first 2 months of the pandemic, 35,000 elderly people died. In 1 week, 7,000 elderly people died. They didn't have the vaccine. Later, as it progressed and they got the vaccine, those numbers were not dying.
You're not saying the vulnerable should not be vaccinated, are you?
This is a very... What we saw in the last 2 years was people like Carole, who I have a huge amount of respect for, but on this particular...
Well, you haven't, because you're saying people like Carole, people who thought the vaccine worked, and it has worked.
People like Carole, who were on those panel shows alongside me, were reading the Daily Mail. And they were reading the mainstream media. And in order
me or anybody else to say we just read one
it was
newspaper.
Absolutely necessary to go and look and find the epidemiologists.
And you really think we didn't do that? Seriously? It's so insulting to say that a journalist only reads the Daily Mail. I have read umpteen papers.
So what do you think of the latest findings of Dr. Ryan Cole? What do you think of what Dr. Robert Malone has said?
I know exactly what I think of what Dr. Maloney said. He's been on this show, and I've said what I think about the guy. Don't try and catch me out about the virologists that I've read. I've read as much as you, if not.
People aren't going to be on the mainstream media. They just aren't. And I was vilified for trying to...
And Malone has been discredited in many quarters, let me tell you.
Oh.
Yes, he has.
Please.
Yes, he has.
Final word, Benjamin.
Do you accept that the COVID vaccine worked? Have you had it yourself?
I think in terms of does it work, we still have no long-term data. And if you look at the latest interview with Gert van den Bosch today, talking about the fact that indiscriminate vaccination during a pandemic will cause the mutations.
Have you had it?
It is still a moving...
Have you had the vaccine?
And again, oh my God,
Well,
literally arrive in a time machine today.
Have you?
We not moved on?
We're all stupid and you know better. And you're not a virologist, but you know better.
I also very much, and I've maintained this, my values and my standards on this issue.
Did you refuse the vaccine? No.
Which is that I will never publicly answer that question. There have been people who there are people who say it's so irrelevant, Carole. It's just ridiculous.
It's not irrelevant.
Okay.
I believe in the principle
we'd still be in
of
lockdown if everyone had taken that view.
Now,
exactly. And there would
let's
be
move
more
on.
deaths.
Although I could talk about this all day.